Hello and welcome to Writing Women, the show where I will be examining the women who exist in fiction and the people who created them. This week is the first book in Tamora Pierce's Protector of the Small Quartet, First Test. I had a bit of trouble deciding which book to do next because after The Realms of the Gods, we reached the point where Tamora Pierce started publishing books in her other universe, the Mindelan books. The first 4 books in that series were published before First Test, and while this series is being published, there are books from the other series sprinkled in between as well. So for the sake of the timeline continuity, I'm doing specifically the Tortall books in order of publication here. Then after that, I will switch to the Mindelan books in order of publication as well. First Test was published in 1999, and I wish I had known about it back then. It would still be a few years before I had my big moment of discovery, but I could have really used the distraction of a good book in 1999. That was around the time, I think, that we lived in the murder house in rural Pennsylvania, and the woman who owned the house had a wolf that she kept in a kennel building in the backyard. I hadn't really started reading a lot yet, and instead I watched the same VHS of 3 Sailor Moon episodes over and over and looked for ghosts in the house. Anyway, here is what happens in First Test. Keladry of Mindelan is the first girl to try to become a page since the proclamation 10 years before. King John, Alanna the Lioness, and Lord Wilden, the training master, argue over what to do about Kel. Obviously, Alanna is all for her becoming a page and wants to help her, but Lord Wilden, who represents the regressive sexism that is still pervasive in their society, is staunchly against the idea. He lists all sorts of reasons, like women being physically weaker and more emotional than men, and Alanna wants to make him eat his words, but she is stopped by John, who is able to mediate the discussion a little bit. Kel's brothers have served the king honorably for years, and many of the fighting men of the realm have died in the Immortals' War or were too injured to remain in the military force. Wilden agrees to allowing Kel a year's probationary period, at which point he will decide if she is capable of continuing as a page or not. Alanna is furious because that is not something that the boys have ever had to do. Wilden also insists that Alanna have absolutely no contact with Kel due to the rumors that she somehow cheated to get her own shield. John agrees and Alanna storms out. Kel and her family are surprised by the letter from the palace. They have been ambassadors to the Amani Islands for years and so learned to keep any emotion from showing on their faces though. In 18 months, her family is to return to the Amani Islands. Kel wanders off to think about her choice and whether or not she wants to go or return to the islands with her family. A soldier gives her a horn to carry with her to use in case she finds trouble in the woods. She decides she doesn't want to become a page if they're going to be unfair about it. She wants to find another way to become a warrior, but she can't join the Queen's Riders because she is too young. She doesn't want to go to the convent school either the way other noble girls do. Kel is built tall and stocky, and people call her a cow behind her back and to her face when they want to mock her. She had to convince her mother that she didn't want to be a knight because she didn't think she would ever marry. She's surprised by a couple of village boys who have snuck out to drown some animals in the river. She fights them off and sends them running. When they're gone, she moves to save the animals and is attacked by a spydren who comes out of the woods. Kel uses the horn to call for help, but the spydren has snagged the sack of animals and pulls out a kitten. It bites the kitten's head off and Kel is furious. She attacks the spydren and it runs. She chases it knowing that help won't come in time to save the kittens. The spydren eats a second kitten, but Kel smashes its nose in with a rock. Kel's brother Anders arrives with men-at-arms in time to save Kel. They recover what's left of the litter of kittens, and Kel brings them to the housekeeper for safekeeping. She goes to her father and tells him she wants to go and train at the palace. She has changed her mind because now she wants to know how to fight, even if she comes home in a year. She will still know more then than she does now and be able to help people. Kel goes to say goodbye to her pony in the stable, and one of her brothers comes to see her. He tells her the unwritten rules of life as a page and warns her how difficult it will be. He also tells her to keep her lessons from the Amanis to herself, saying that others may see it as her thinking she's better than them if she goes on about it. That night, Kel dreams of a time Scanran pirates attacked the islands and her mother saved their lives. This experience and her idolization of Alanna the Lioness is why she is so determined to become a warrior. Kel and her father arrive at the palace. Lord Wilden is frosty toward her and openly tells her he won't have her causing any mischief. He also tells her that she is not to have any boys in her room without the door open, etc. When her father points out that she is only 10 and thus a little bit young for what Wilden is implying, Wilden replies that in his experience, girls start young. Side note, I apologize if you can hear a lot of background noise. There's a trio of crows that lives in the tree outside my window, and they caw constantly when they want food, or if there's food down but the neighborhood cat is eating it, they try to caw at her to chase her away so that they can eat it. And they're just outside my window going nuts right now, and there is nothing I can do to stop them. Kind of feels like Kel later in the story with her sparrows. Back to the story. Kel says goodbye to her father, and the housekeeper Salma takes her to her room. She arrives to find it destroyed. The walls are marked up with messages telling her no girls allowed and urging her to leave. Salma comes in and is sympathetic. She tells Kel that she should expect more things like this to happen, and she won't let Kel help clean it up. While changing for dinner, Kel decides to throw her femininity in the faces of the other pages and wear a dress instead of a shirt and breeches like she'd originally planned. A practice that she continues throughout her time as a page. Lord Wilden is assigning sponsors to the pages, and at first nobody wants to sponsor Kel. Joran of Stone Mountain initially volunteers, and Kel notices he seems a little suspicious. Wilden is reluctant because apparently Joran is a poor student and horseback rider. So instead, Neilin of Queen's Cove volunteers. Neil is the son of Duke Baird, the palace healer. He is 15 and so much older than the other pages, but his experience living at court makes him a good candidate to show Kel the ropes. Neil gets himself into trouble by sassing Wilden to distract everyone from Kel's embarrassment. Kel constantly reminds herself of the Yamani way of hiding their emotions, imagining herself as an immovable stone or a clear, calm lake. Wilden accepts Neil as Kel's sponsor, and they leave for dinner. Kel asks Neil why he volunteered, and he explains that he's spent his life at court and seen the queen and her riders fight, not to mention seeing the lioness firsthand. Kel asks if she'll meet Alanna, and Neil says that she isn't often at court. At dinner, Wilden gives a speech about the dangers of change and invokes Mithros to bring them back to a time of their fathers when things were better. Kel knows that the speech is about his dislike for women joining the pages. Neil explains that he calls Wilden the stump because he is so stiff, and tells Kel the story of how Wilden saved the prince and princess during the Immortals' War. Kel is impressed and calls Wilden a hero. Neil points out that he can still be a stump while being a hero. And he says that Wilden has been complaining about changes in the kingdom since the king and queen were married. Salma shows up with magic keys for Kel and explains that her room is now sealed with spells and nobody but the two of them have keys to enter. Neil takes Kel to see the portrait gallery, and along the way they meet the basilisk Taka, who is now teaching pages about immortals. In the gallery, Kel sees a portrait of Thayet and compliments her. Neil warns her to never say that around Wilden, who believes the queen ruined Tortall with her notions about women fighting and commoners learning to read. The next day, Kel feeds the sparrows in the courtyard outside her room before she dresses and leaves for her first day. Eventually, these sparrows become Kel's animal companions. In her first hand-to-hand training with the Shang horse and wildcat, Kel surprises everyone by countering a throw by the horse. He identifies Kel's training as Yamani and talks with her about her teacher from the islands, the Imperial Training Master, who also taught him. She realizes that she has done what her brother told her not to. She looks like she's showing off to the other pages. In some of her training, Kel is outright ignored by her instructors until her partners try to actually hurt her, which she sees the teachers notice and they let it happen. She's eventually paired with Joran for a striking exercise. He at first seems to be a good partner, but then starts slipping his staff out of the pattern to force her to mess up and look bad to the teachers. After he hits her in the face, she decides to fight back against him. The others distract the teachers so that Joran can attack Kel without interruption. Joran tells her that the lioness is a mage and a cheater while attacking her. Kel uses her experience training since she was a child in the Yamani Islands to best Joran in the scuffle, and she disarms him. Wilden walks in and is shocked at her use of the staff. The Shang warriors explain that Kel probably learned to use a glaive in the islands and encouraged the learning of the technique to the pages. Wilden calls the Yamani method savage and unfit for Tortallan nobles. They pick their mounts, and Kel winds up with a large gelding with clear signs of misuse on him. His name is Peach Blossom. Kel chooses him to save him from being put down because he is considered to be ruined for knight's work. Peach Blossom constantly fights her, but she won't give up on him. Kel eventually also meets Sir Miles of Olo, still teaching history and now outright the spy master of King Jonathan. They meet Lindhall Reed, who still has the animated skeleton Bone Dancer. Lindhall teaches pages about plants and animals. While the pages with the gift study magic, Kel and the others go to class with Taka. She is singled out by the etiquette teacher, Oakbridge, who only refers to her as probationary page. They are given a book and assigned a report on it, Kell sees the book and smiles, and Oakbridge insists that she tell the class what she found so funny. Kell points out to him that the book was written by her own father, a fact that he might have known if he had remembered her name. Oakbridge tells Kell to review the entire book, and he will test her on etiquette the next day. She explains to him that etiquette is serious in the Amani court, where she lived for most of her life. He says she will assist him at the Amani state visit if she passes his exam. King John joins them for dinner, and Kell is reminded how badly she wants to serve him in his kingdom, but how unfairly he is treating her by making her be on probation. She thinks about how chivalry is supposed to work two ways. You serve your overlord fairly, and they deal with you fairly. When Kell returns to her room, she finds a magnificent belt knife and whetstone with a note on it saying "Goddess bless" and no indication of who sent it. She writes to her family asking for green tea and more gowns to wear to dinner so she can keep reminding the boys that she is a girl. She doesn't tell them that Prince Roald occasionally sits with her and Neil at mealtimes. Kell thinks that he's nervous about his upcoming marriage to the Amani princess. She doesn't tell them about the things the other pages do to her either. Kell is injured by Peach Blossom, and Neil heals it for her. He tells Kell that he gave up being a healer because his family takes pride in knighthood. She doesn't think this is the whole story, but he won't tell her anymore. He takes her to meet our girl Dane, who talks to Peach Blossom for her about being nicer to Kell. Neil obviously has a crush on Dane, which Kell finds very funny. Dane tells Kell that she can heal Peach Blossom's mouth to soften it for her and help him with the pain from his scars, but she can't change his nature. Kell tells her that she wouldn't want Dane to change it, even if she could. Peach Blossom agrees to be nicer to Kell if she promises to never spur him. Dane even offers to buy Peach Blossom to save him and let Kell get a different horse, but Kell and Peach Blossom have an agreement now, and she wants to be his partner. Kell later walks up on Joran and his friends bullying a younger page, Merrick. Kell defends Merrick, but runs when it looks like it's going to be a fight. She doesn't want to be kicked out for fighting. The pages learn to joust, a practice that almost died out in Tortall until the Immortals came. Lances on horseback is the best method of attack against many larger immortals. Kell does poorly and is embarrassed to see Raoul of Golden Lake watching. Kell is too exhausted to complete much of her work, and Sir Miles pulls her aside to talk to her after class. He asks her what's going on and tells her that she can come to him if she ever needs a friend. Kell understands that her upper body strength is poor and that she needs to work harder than the boys to increase it so she can hold her lance. She goes to find the Shang Wildcat and ask her for help. The Wildcat shows her arm exercises like push-ups, and Kell goes to study with Neil and the Prince. The three of them now have a regular study group. After lance practice one day, she discovers that her lance had been tampered with and filled with lead, making it far heavier than the other lances. The first day, Joran had been the one handing out lances, so she knows it was him who did it. Neil and Prince Roald notice something is wrong, and she refuses to tell them, not wanting to complain. She goes out alone and hunts down Joran, who is again bullying Merrick. She tells them that there is a difference between initiation and hazing and questions his honor. The fight is brutal, and Kell gives as good as she gets. Later in Wilden's office, he tries to get her to admit to the fight. Kell knows the time-honored tradition of claiming that you fell instead of admitting to fighting, but someone has told Lord Wilden about the fight. Lord Wilden says that he imagines she wants to go home now, but she insists that going home after falling down would be silly. He assigns her punishment and sends her to the healers. Neil takes Kell to his father. Neil is furious about 3 older pages jumping a first year, and Kell admits to him and his father that she actually started it. Baird is in mourning for his 2 older sons, who died in the Immortals' War, but still jokes with Kell about dancing with her mother when they were young. The sparrows are now hanging out in Kell's room with her, and they greet her in the mornings by perching on her chest. Kell runs into Merrick in the hall, and he's angry with her, thinking that he will be bullied more now for being saved by a girl. He tries to hit her as the other pages come out to see what's going on. Kell ignores him, knowing it's his bruised pride talking, and she walks away. The other half of her fight appear in the mess hall, and they look way worse off than Kell. The older page Cleon appears and sends Kell on one of his many errands for her. Cleon participates in the initiation rituals, but he never bullies the younger pages the way Joran and his friends do. Joran and his friends openly declare war against Kell. They up their harassment of her and lay traps for her outside her room. At the winter holidays, Kell gives her friends, including the prince, gifts, and she receives them as well. She also receives another mysterious unmarked gift labeled Bruise Balm that immediately heals her bruises. She shows it to Neil, and he discovers a powerful healing magic in it, telling her that it's worth its weight in gold. She shows him the knife she had received before, and they puzzle over who her mysterious benefactor could be. The study group of Kell, Neil, and the prince grows as Kell begins to patrol the hallways in the evenings. Even the older page Cleon joins them. When she finds Joran and his friends bullying more pages on her patrols, she fights them. Eventually, her friends find out what she's doing, and they join her after a rousing speech about how any type of initiation or hazing is wrong because it leads to more things like how Joran behaves. One day, on a run around the walls, everyone finds out about Kel's crippling fear of heights. Her brother hung her out over a balcony when she was young, and she freezes when she is high up now. Wilden calms her and talks her through her panic attack, but she is humiliated by everyone finding out. In this time, Kel also masters jousting. Her arm strength exercises made her able to lift her lance better, and she began hitting the target with it more regularly. Eventually, the lance shatters, and she goes to get a new one, but Joran is there and hands her one that he has again tampered with. She is so full of rage that a calm comes over her, and when she goes back to the jousting field, she hits the target dead center every time, impressing even Lord Wilden, though of course he won't admit it. Eventually, the end of the school year comes, and with it, the first-year exams. Kel passes all of them. She notices that Raoul of Golden Lake and Alanna the Lioness aren't judges for even the older page exams. Neil explains that many nobles believe all of the knights from that time are assumed to have conspired to cheat Alanna into her position, and so they are not allowed to be judges of these exams. The pages pack up for their next stage of training, which is a camping trip into the royal forest. Kel leaves her courtyard sparrows in the care of Salma, worrying about who will care for them in the fall when Wilden sends her home. While trekking through the forest, a thunderstorm causes many of the pages to ask Wilden to stop. He turns to Kel and asks her if she agrees with them and wants a comfortable bed to sleep in, and she responds that it doesn't really matter what she wants because he is in command, and thus she will follow his orders. The Yamani Shang horse tells Wilden that he may not think much of Yamanis, but they know how to train warriors like Kel, and that he expected no less from Lady Eileen's daughter. Wilden asks him what he means, and the horse tells Wilden of how Kel's mother is responsible for the Yamani emperor welcoming her family. During the Scanran attack of Kel's dreams, her mother had saved the golden weapons of the gods that were sacred to the islands and protected them from the raiders with her glaive until the guards found her and Kel. Wilden lightly acknowledges this and leaves. Kel's sparrows have actually followed her, and they protect her privacy by surprising boys who are sneaking up on her using a latrine. In the isolation of the forest, Joran takes the chance to attack her. Kel tells him that he does no credit to Wilden acting like this, and Joran replies that Wilden will prize anyone who would rid him of her. Kel fears that Wilden will make her leave because of her fear of heights, but instead, during a mapping exercise, he tells her to climb a tree and stands at the bottom talking her through it a bit. She can't make it up the tree, and Wilden tells her that she will climb the tree every day to at least learn to work through it. And every time he orders her up the tree, he stands at the bottom and talks to her. Kel finally learns about the reason for the lioness' absence, and Kel is sort of relieved to know that Alanna doesn't hate her for taking the glory of being the only Lady Knight. The pages pack up and have to join some of the king's own on a hunt for spydrins who have carried off a woman from a forest village. Kel joins the hunt, and the search for the spydrins is slow. She wishes that she were Dane, and muses out loud to her sparrows that she wishes she could ask them to help find the spydrins. Of course, being intelligent from the influence of Dane's magic in the palace, they fly off and later return trying to get her attention. They bring a stick covered in spydrin web. She shows it to Raoul, and he sees that it is fresh. She explains about the sparrows and tells them that she thinks they could lead the soldiers to the spydrins. Raoul puts Kel on point to follow the sparrows, and they find a nest of about 20 spydrins. The pages are to join the fight. Wilden has told the soldiers that they are all up to it, and Kel wonders if Wilden meant to include her in that. The battle is joined, and Kel is a lookout at the rear along with her companions. It is hard to hold to her orders to keep her back to the real battle and watch the rear, but Kel keeps remembering the spydrin who ate the kittens, and it helps her stay focused. Spydrins do attack the rear, and Kel is the one who raises the call. Another page charges the spydrin, yelling about how they killed his father. Kel knocks him down out of the way of the spydrin's attack and takes command. She organizes them against their foes. More spydrins arrive, but they hesitate at the sight of all of the pages arranged against them. Kel defends herself with her spear as archers hit the spydrins. After the battle, they find hatchling spydrins in the lair, and they have to burn them. The pages return to the palace to pack and return home. The king and the Shang warriors join the pages for dinner. The king congratulates the pages for what they did and tells them to go home and relax for a while before coming back the next year. When the king leaves, Wilden sends the pages off, but tells Kel to report to him in his office in an hour. The pages all say goodbye to Kel, thinking that she is going home for good. She has saved some of them throughout the year, and they are sad to see her go. Kel goes to say goodbye to her sparrows, thinking that she will not be returning. She stops herself from crying, not wanting Wilden to see the evidence of tears on her face, and goes to his office. Wilden tells Kell that he is speaking to her as he would one of his own daughters. He tells Kell that soon her body will change and her desires may change as well. He tells her to go home and think about what he said, but that she can come back in the fall if she wants to. Kell can't believe it. She goes to find her friends to tell them. Her parents are staying at their house in Chorus, and she is happy to spend her summer going into the palace to ride Peach Blossom. During the summer, another mysterious crate arrives at the house, and inside she finds a magnificent tilting saddle. No note, just like her previous gifts. She tells her parents of the other gifts, and on the saddle, Kell finds a secret compartment with another note inside of it. On it is written, "Goddess bless Lady Page." My summaries are getting more and more like me just reading the books out loud, because the more books Pierce writes, the more detailed and intricate they become. And as I said before, there was a whole quartet in another universe that came out between Immortals and this one, so that's a lot of practice. I think the first thing I notice is that Pierce has really changed the page training since Alanna's books. This can be explained a bit in universe as changes made by John, but I think it is largely due to realizing that the old way it was written was too broad and needed to be changed. It now has a more boarding school vibe than it did before, which works really well for young adult books. That's not the only change in the book from the established canon, though. It is the only one that I can explain away with in-universe explanations, though. The part in the beginning where Alanna storms out on John and Wilden, and the narrative voice says they were trying to figure out if she had ever spoken to John like that before, is a weird retcon. I mean, of course it was probably written assuming that people probably wouldn't have read her other books and thus wouldn't remember all of the woman who rides like a man. But still, if you have read her other books, it's a little weird because she definitely has spoken to John like that before for the entirety of that book. Wilden wouldn't know about it, of course, but John, who is included in that narrative description, certainly would. This is also the source of my confusion that I mentioned last time on the size of the spydrens. Kell is described in her intro as already 5 feet tall at age 10, and later when her brother saves her from the spydrens, he says that she is supposed to have real weapons when she fights something twice as big as her, meaning that the spydren had to be around 10 feet tall. I also find it weird that the spydrens don't really talk in this book, and they have in every other appearance in every other book. In this one, they only make screeching sounds. Now, how do I feel about the women in this book? I'll talk about the two that stand out to me. So I will start with Kell's mother, Elaine. She is a loving mother who wants the best for her daughter, and even though she doesn't like the idea, she agrees to let Kell be a page because she knows it's what she wants. We find out more about her in Kell's dream, and also from the accounts of people who knew her. I like that she is not written as a shrew who wants Kell to be more like a girl, but as a woman who will pick up a weapon and defend the life of herself and her child when needed, even if she doesn't like doing it. Now, Kell, what can I say about her? She's amazing. She's wonderful. She's great. She is the culmination of what we started in Song of the Lioness. Alanna had to walk so that Kell could run, and Kell runs like she's in a marathon. It's nice to see a writer who doesn't fall for the trap of, we have a lady knight so sexism is dead, or we have a progressive leader so prejudice is gone. Unfortunately, in the real world, it doesn't work like that, and that grounds this story in a recognizable reality. This short story about a girl who wants to be a warrior shows the ridiculousness of the assumption that if you put someone of a traditionally oppressed demographic into a position of power and authority, it doesn't mean things are better for everybody in that demographic. A handful of people in positions of power does nothing to change systemic oppression. It's just one person that the public has generally accepted as an exceptional specimen who is above everybody else who looks like them. They are the exception, not the rule. And that is especially true when it comes to women in positions of power, especially women in military structure. I experienced it time and time again when I saw women around me who advanced quickly in the military. The first thing that angry people said when they were passed over for promotion in favor of a woman was that she somehow cheated her way to the top, that she must have gotten that promotion by lying on her back or through some other illicit means. A woman who advances quickly, even if it is based on her own merit, it is assumed that she, much like Alanna in this book, did so by cheating, because there is no way that a woman could actually be as good as or better than a man. That's also why I have such a problem with the phrase, "I'm just as good as the boys." That phrase implies that you have to be set apart from other girls as better or stronger to be accepted in a traditionally masculine environment, which means that other girls are still not good enough because they aren't special like you. Being just as good as the boys is the first level on your galaxy brain journey of what girls are capable of doing. In a society that socializes women to do specific types of tasks and gatekeeps other things as only for boys, we really need that first wave of girls who won't let themselves be excluded, though. You see the discrimination against Kel in such small details that I have to imagine Pierce experienced something similar at some point. Lord Wilden talks about how Kel will cause trouble by existing, rather than that boys around her will cause trouble because she is a girl. The blame is put at her feet because those around her can't handle her existing in their space. And it must be her fault, rather than them examining their own behavior. It makes me think of all of those times girls in my high school were sent home for wearing shorts 1 inch too short because the boys just couldn't help themselves and were distracted by her. It's so subtle and terrible because things like that are directly translatable to the real world. When we find out Wilden has daughters, it's surprising because the assumption is that if you have daughters, you will be more sympathetic to women. He represents the common reality that often fathers have an idea of what they want their daughters to be and refuse to let them budge out of that mold. He is challenged by Kel. His whole view of the world is challenged by her. In the end, he tells her he is going to speak to her like one of his own daughters, and we as the reader realize that's what he's been doing this whole time. Treating her as if he would one of his daughters who stepped out of line in what he deemed appropriate for them. Kinda makes me feel bad for his daughters. Wilden is actually one of my favorite supporting characters in this series because though he is a foil for Kel, representing the general conservative beliefs that are in direct contrast with her existence, he is still complex. In my home state, I could throw a rock and hit 10 people who act just like him. So seeing him gradually accept Kel in his own way is so gratifying. Now back to Kel, she is thus far in the series the most well-rounded character. She has an extensive family that we learn a lot about, even though they are only in the story briefly. We get a good sense of what her life was like growing up. We find out her fears and even how some of them developed. She is calm, which is a total 180 from the hot-headed Alanna, and I would argue the quick-to-anger Dane. A perhaps controversial opinion, I don't really like when main characters are hotheads. Despite my love of Alanna, obviously. I think it's easier to write someone who gets angry all the time because it makes conversations exciting to write when they're always an argument. Kel is patient and thinks through everything she says and does. It's not as exciting as Alanna yelling at people or Dane storming off, but it is different. It gives Kel a voice that is uniquely hers. And that is important in a world populated by characters that we already know and love and might be tempted to listen to or want to hear from more than her. I also really like Kel's stance against hazing. It's very true that any practice of hazing quickly devolves into bullying, and is uniformly, across the board, wrong. Kel's collection of lucky cats actually made me start collecting them when I was younger. A lot of them have gone missing from multiple moves, and I'm pretty sure some ex-romantic partners took a few of them at one point. Any size, color, or material. I had one set that were made of a clear green-tinted plasticky material, and they were adorable. They're packed away in a box somewhere because I couldn't afford a place with enough space to display them after a while, which makes me sad. Now, I will be in surgery this upcoming Monday and recovering while trying to take my exams from home the rest of the week. So for real this time, next week I may not be able to manage a regular episode. I will be taking pain medication and so may only be able to manage half-heartedly playing games or something that doesn't require much focus. After next week, I will hopefully be through the worst of the recovery, so I should be back to normal schedule. Or who knows, maybe my undeniable need to be actively doing something during quarantine will make it so I can't stop myself from recording. Thank you for joining me, and if you liked this video, please remember to like it and subscribe if you are interested in seeing more. If you have anything you want to add, please go ahead in the comments. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, then go to patreon.com/writingwomen. Thanks to my current patrons, Mariodoc Brandybuck, Miss Psycho, Amy Chu aka The Doctor, and Bruce.